Welcome to Ripple Effect Connection. I'm your host, Christy Hugic, and today I'm not going to waste any time. I'm going to get right into it. I want to talk about stress, something you're probably all too familiar with. Maybe it's the deadlines piling up, the constant notifications on your phone, or just the overwhelm of life. Stress tends to creep in, take hold, and before you know it, it's running the show. As a health coach, I see it all the time. Chronic stress isn't just something we feel. It's something that affects every part of our health, from sleep and energy to hormones to weight loss to mental clarity and even our physical well-being. The real question is, are we managing it the right way, if at all? Today, I'm joined by Dr. David Rabin, a neuroscientist, board-certified psychiatrist, and health tech entrepreneur who's spent his entire career redefining how we approach stress, trauma, and mental health. He's the co-founder and chief medical officer of Apollo Neuroscience, creators of a groundbreaking wearable device that's scientifically proven to help your nervous system feel safe, balanced, and in control through simple vibrations. Don't worry, we're going to explain it all and how it works. Dr. Dave's brilliance doesn't stop there, though. He's the executive director of the Board of Medicine and a leading researcher in psychedelic-assisted therapy for treatment-resistant mental illnesses. His work continues to push boundaries, bridging the gap between mental health care and innovative solutions. In this episode, we'll uncover why stress and trauma are so pervasive, what they're doing to your nervous system, the ways many modern approaches are missing the mark, and how tools like Apollo Neuro are bridging the gap. Plus, stick around for a sneak peek at how Dr. Dave and his team are making this incredible technology accessible to all. Let's dive right in. Dr. Dave Rabin, welcome to Ripple Effect Connection. We so appreciate you taking the time out to join us.
It's my pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
I ask this question first and foremost to every guest that I have. So the first question is, what is your why and the reason you do what you do?
It's a great question. So I think my why, major why, is that I'm just, believe that everyone deserves the right to feel good, and that for a long time, historically, I believe that you are probably somebody who's fascinated by history like I am, and how little we learn from history, and we often repeat the same mistakes. But pleasure and feeling good are such a critically important part of healing that is important to ancient Eastern and tribal cultures, and even ancient Western medicine through Hippocrates. And we just lost that in modern society. And a lot of Western religions, starting with Catholicism, Christianity, demonized intimacy, sexuality, and really centered around like reproduction that is only to be contained and experienced within the confines of church-sanctioned marriage and all of that kind of thing. And that's all well and good for a lot of people, but when it bleeds over into pleasure and feeling good being a only self-indulgent thing, is really hampering to human health and wellness. And I think what's most exciting to me about the modern era of medicine that we're in is that we now know from science, very, very well and thorough science, that pleasure and feeling good is critically important to our health and well-being, and we can't ignore it. And so I think for me, it's really about, I had to learn this the hard way. I think, growing up, we are often taught, if you're feeling too good about something or too much pleasure about something, like maybe you're doing something wrong or you shouldn't be feeling that. Well, I think that is not correct. And there's a lot of opportunity to do more things that make us feel good, bring more joy into our lives, invite more pleasure into our lives, particularly when we feel safe, because that safety is really the key. And helping people feel safe enough to feel good is really seemingly now at the crux of this major transformation we're going through in Western medicine. And so that's been a big motivator for me in my career and in my life.
I love it. I am going to come back to some of that later on. I'm going to touch on some of those things that you referenced in there because they are pearls. And, I've listened to you speak before. I've heard some of the things you've said before and some of the things you already mentioned, but we are going to get into some of that. But I want to know right now, too, is how you're a neuroscientist, a psychiatrist, a health tech entrepreneur. How do those roles kind of intersect in your world, and your work today?
In every way. I think I've always been a fan of invention, and growing up, invention being like, how do we take, if you've ever read Nikola Tesla or Thomas Edison or any of these folks who invented new things that revolutionized the way we live and breathe and function as human beings in society, all of them had a similar mindset about the world, which was entrepreneurial in a lot of ways, about like assessing, and it's a very like research discovery based approach to life, which is not just being satisfied with the way things are, right? And it's I think that is really critical to us as in our human nature that we don't think about enough, which is that things are the way they are, which is all well and good, and at the same time they could be a lot better, right? Like, we spend a lot of time doing things that accidentally hurt people, ourselves, the environment, without having the foresight to understand the outcome of our actions downstream. And it's about, like eating too much sugar or using too many drugs, or engaging in negative thought processes, or not treating people well, or whatever it is, not treating the environment well, making too much garbage, whatever it is, right? All of these things are actions that we take for a short-term gain that actually have create a long-term harm. I think we think about if you can objectively, without taking it personally, just if we can all kind of step back and recognize, hey, things are so much better than they were 50, 100, 200 years ago. Look how far we've come as a species, as a culture, as a society. And yet at the same time, the earth is hurting, right? Like, look at what's going on in LA right now with the fires and these windstorms and around the world, unprecedented natural disasters that we've never seen the likes of happening so close together that we absolutely can't contain. And it makes us, I think if you're a curious person, it makes you wonder, how could we do a better job of not just dealing with this stuff after it happens, but preventing it from happening in the first place. And I think that's really like the entrepreneurial spirit. That's the inventor spirit. That's where we start to force ourselves to think outside the box and come up with new solutions for problems that we've been dealing with for a really long time. And the practice of medicine and is really not separate from that. I think over the last, not to ramble too much, but over the last, 50 years, medicine has gone from a field where every single doctor was taught to do research and think outside the box about how to make medicine better all the time, to one where doctors are trained to be factory workers, to follow rules by the book, and to work within a kind of like very confined, formulaic factory-like system and check all the boxes. And if those boxes don't work, well, sorry, like, we don't really have much for you, right? Let's just keep trying that same system. Well, like, what about all those people, especially in mental health? There's like 50% of the people who get treated by Western medicine for mental health are non-responders to that treatment. So do we keep trying the same thing that doesn't work? I mean, I can't remember who said this, but that's like the definition of insanity, right? If you know you're doing one thing and it's not working over and over and over again, you keep doing it. I don't know, not for me. So yeah. I think that's where, for me, like the research mindset of, how does the brain work? How does the brain work with the body? How does the brain work with the body when we're functioning at our best? And then when we start to dysfunction, how does that interact in an interface with the environment? And then where can we start to make improvements by thinking outside the box about all of these different resources and tools we have available, technology, plant medicines, bringing in the ancient breathing, yogic exercise techniques, new thought techniques, Freudian and Jungian thought techniques. Like, where does it all meet in the middle with, science and spirituality, right? Maybe they're not so different. Maybe the confusion has been we think they're different, right? And then you start to pull on those threads and then all of it comes together. So for me, it's about, I always try to being a peacemaker in my family, I'm always trying to figure out, like, where does everything meet in the middle in harmony, and how do we take all of the great info that we have and knowledge and then come out with a better solution at the end.
Yeah, and I think functional medicine, we're better at that than Western medicine, right? Because that's what we're doing. And I mean, I think about how my own journey through functional medicine has evolved, and how even as a practitioner now, how much it's changes so quickly, because I don't think, in my personal practice, I've never treated two people the same ever. Like the protocols they don't match. It's not like I'm taking one formulaic thing and saying that, you fit in this box and you fit in that box. So I think you're right. The more we can think about things like that, the better off we would all be. And I think one thing I see with clients personally and at the clinic, the big thing I see that I could tell you, like, what do you hear the most from everybody? It's stress. It comes up with every patient, every client. And the stress of today is not the stress of 20 years ago, kind of like you were talking about how the world is. In your work, do you find that people are aware of how stress affects them, or are they often so disconnected from recognizing it or even struggling to understand and define what stress is? Can you talk about that? Because I just think there's an awareness, like I hear so many times, I'm not stressed, because they don't understand all the different things that can make up stress.
Yeah, for sure. All of the above, right? I think, and there's a whole spectrum of people who are well aware that they're stressed out but don't know what to do about it. And then there's people who are aware that they're stressed out, they know what to do about it, and they're doing it. Then there's people who are aware they're stressed out, they know what to do about it, but they're not doing it, right? And then there's the people who don't even know and ignore it completely. But the stress is still there. So regardless of who we are, where we come from, the color of our skin, our ethnic background, whatever it is, we're all exposed to chronic stress on a regular basis. I think the thing and this is something about in medicine that has always fascinated me, is when you look at people who reach what we would call in society like the peak of human performance, right? So like Olympic athletes, Michael Jordan like people who believe and then achieve a level of human functioning that in their specialty domain that is above and beyond, or even multiple domains, like a Leonardo da Vinci, right? Like somebody who like achieves in multiple domains a level of success that is just blows everybody else out of the water. And then you look at people who are so sick that they can't get out of bed in the morning, right? And because they're so depressed or they're so anxious. And when we talk to those people, what's really interesting to me, and I've interviewed and treated and worked and coached, I don't know, hundreds or thousands of these folks across all this entire spectrum. And what's really fascinating to me is, and I've always wondered, like, what separates them? And it's not that some people experience stress and hardship and others didn't. It's that they all experienced hardship, but that the people who achieved a certain level of peak performance and growth as a result of that hardship had the support systems in place, either internally or externally through like family, friends, et cetera, around them, that helped them to understand that stress, hardship, trauma is really just an opportunity for growth, even though it can suck in the moment and sometimes suck even more afterwards. It's just an opportunity for growth. And then how do we leverage that opportunity to become better, stronger, faster afterwards, right? Yeah. And make sure that we're not as susceptible to those kinds of stresses and that we don't suffer consequences of those kinds of stresses in the future. And then that is what the field of chronic stress is now really highlighting for us, which is really important because support after a traumatic or challenging event has never really been a huge focus of Western culture, even in mental health. Like what's the most common thing that a parent says to a child or that a friend says to a friend after somebody feels safe enough to tell you, hey, this really hard thing happened to me and I'm feeling bad about it? Especially women who have suffered sexual trauma, what's the first thing they hear? It's like, why did you let that happen to you?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And like, that could not be more harmful of a thing to say to somebody who has just felt safe enough to communicate to you that they are struggling with overcoming hardship, right? What they need to know is, hey, that really sucks. I'm so sorry that happened. Like, I'm here for you. If you need anything, you want to talk, you just want somebody to listen to you, like, I'm here. And that's the support those people need. They need to feel heard, seen, and held. They don't need judgment and they don't need criticism. And it's the judgment and the criticism, and Gabor Mate talks about this a lot, that actually compounds the fractured self-trust that is at the core of trauma, which is if I couldn't keep myself safe in this situation that just created all this challenge and hardship for me, then how can I keep myself safe in the future? When the people I trust are telling me it was my fault, how can I keep myself safe? Right? And so it can literally be that simple of an interaction after a challenging situation or event, regardless of how challenging that event or situation was, or how frequent, that kind of interaction that we provide to each other, usually on accident. Most people don't realize they're re-traumatizing somebody when they provide them judgment after a situation like that. They mean well most of the time, but we don't teach people how to navigate those experiences. And so that's free. Like when you think of, like, you don't need to go to decades of trauma therapy after you have bad stuff happen. You just need somebody to say, hey, it's okay. This wasn't your fault. Like, if you need somebody to talk to, I'm here. And then that helps them cope with and grow from the experience rather than re-traumatizing themselves by blaming themselves for the experience. And so it's those little things that really ultimately make this huge difference long term. And that's cool and very exciting and hopeful because we can pass that on to each other very easily.
It's a simple thing too, you would think, right? It would be a really simple thing. But then when the person doesn't get it out or there's shame around it, and then it manifests and then it grows into a beast and an animal, and it manifests into overwhelm of the nervous system, and it manifests into symptoms and sickness down the road. Why is the nervous system struggling so much in this modern world?
So I've always been fascinated by this question. And I think that to really understand what's happening, we have to break down the nervous system into the simplest explanation of what's happening as possible. And so if we break down the stress response in the nervous system, there's two core parts of the nervous system that exist in our bodies that are running in the background all the time. And most people who are listening have heard of these two parts. One of them is called the sympathetic fight or flight nervous system that is responding to stress. And we evolved for hundreds of millions of years, since ancient sea snails from Eric Kandel's Nobel Prize winning work in 2000, we evolved these systems to respond to stress and get us from a survival threatening situation to safety. And that system is critical for that. It is not supposed to be activated when we have too many emails, too much news, too many screaming children, too many responsibilities. That is not when that system's supposed to be activated. It's evolved to activate when we're running from a predator, when we run out of food, run out of water, run out of air, or we've been like excommunicated from our community, right? That's when that system is supposed to kick in. And in our modern society, the way that system evolved to be triggered is fear and uncertainty. So the sympathetic fight or flight system, or fight, flight, freeze is commonly described nowadays, gets activated by fear and uncertainty, newness in cases where we're already stressed out. And so that's really important to keep in mind, because when you think about uncertainty as a fear trigger, evolutionarily, uncertainty could be anything. It could be like a bear lurking outside your cave. It could be the potential absence of food in the future. Like, who knows what it could be? It could be a storm coming, right? Like, it could be anything. Yep. And so that's supposed to trigger that response. So what happens when you get overwhelmed by too much information, right? You are triggering an uncertainty response because it's too much information for any person to process at any given time. So to give you an idea of that, there was an interesting study I read that was just looking at how much information humans take in today compared to in the 1950s. And it said, basically what they were saying was, we are overstimulated, right? Part of why we're so stressed out is we're overstimulated. And if you look at, because of, in large part, screens and smartphone technology, people who wake up in the morning and look at their phones in the first hour of being awake are intaking as much information as the average human took in a week in the 1950s.
The numbers are crazy.
It's a tremendous amount of information. It's more information than any human can process. And then you multiply that times not just the first hour of every day, but what about every hour after that?
Yeah.
Right? And so, of course, that the fear response in the sympathetic fight or flight system is getting triggered all the time. And then when you look and measure people's bodies, whether you're using like clinical lab grade equipment or wearables like the Oura Ring, Apple Watch, etc., what do you see? You see heart rates are really high. Blood pressure's high. Respiratory and breathing rate is high. We're supposed to be breathing at 5 to 7 breaths per minute. What is the average breathing rate of a human being that is measured when they go to the doctor's office? It's 12 to 24 breaths per minute. That's stress breathing. Why is that the norm? Because most people are stressed out by the time they get to their doctor, right?
Yep.
But that's not normal. We should not be breathing normally at that 12 to 24 rate. We should be breathing at 5 to 7. 5 to 7 breaths per minute is what activates the parasympathetic other side of the nervous system, which is the safety response system, and it's governed by the vagus nerve. It's affectionately called the rest and digest or recovery nervous system. And the vagus nerve is responsible for taking in safety information, so either physical, mental, emotional safety, and then saying, I'm safe enough, reminding the body, and the body, or even the body reminding the mind, that says, hey, I'm safe enough to settle down and take all my resources that we're going to escape, survival, fight, or flight, and then redirect them back to recovery, which includes sleep, digestion and absorption of food, immunity, reproduction, empathy, all of the things that we want to be active when we're relaxing and recovering and hanging out with our friends and family, but all the things we don't want to be activated when we're running from a lion. Exactly. And there's only so many resources to go around, right? We only have so much blood and so much oxygen and so much nutrients. And so the body has to dynamically, moment to moment, regulate where is the blood going. And so these two nervous systems very simply are just managing resources in real time to determine, are you under potential threat, real or perceived threat, or are you safe enough to recover? And if you're safe enough to recover, blood gets diverted back to recovery systems. If you're not safe enough to recover for any reason, or you convince yourself you're not safe enough to recover, all that blood goes to the heart, lungs, skeletal muscles, motor cortex of the brain, fight or flight systems. And guess where it gets taken from? It gets taken from all of your recovery systems. So we're still asking ourselves to digest and absorb our food. We're still asking ourselves to reproduce, to be empathetic and sensitive to our partners and our friends and family. But those systems are deprived of resources, and they're deprived of the other thing that blood does, which is waste removal.
Yeah.
So that is kind of like, if you think about this from a very reductionist perspective, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to understand why your organ systems might get sick and why you might have like reproductive or digestive dysfunction, for as some examples, or why you might get sick more often when you're stressed, because those systems are getting no blood flow, no nutrients, nutrient deprivation, and waste removal deprivation. None of us could survive longer than a week or two without food and without water, and without limited food and limited water and no garbage pickup. We would lose it, right? So why 100%. Should our organs do that?
Yep, 100%. You put that so well, and I could not wait to hear your answer for that, and you delivered on that, because we try to tell patients these things and how connected they are, and it sometimes takes time to just get them to buy in. But the patients that succeed from recovering from things like we see at Dr. Cole's clinic with autoimmune disease, the people that succeed are the people that buy into all of this, from getting more nutrients to nervous system work to top to bottom. And so I think this brings me to the device you created, the Apollo Neuro, because I think now that we've established that everyone maybe listening understands, every single person listening has stress, every single one. No one's exempt, and no one can say, I'm not stressed. If you have a phone, you have an email, you have, my one friend said, well, I don't use my phone a lot, but her to-do list is the length of her forearm. And that's stress, okay? That alone, looking at that is stress, right? So I think it's important to go over these ways that people can do something about this. And you created a device called the Apollo Neuro, which I have it on. If you're watching the video, we both have it on. I love it, and I have loved it, and I've been fascinated by it for a long time, and we've seen plenty of patients have success. There are going to be some people listening to this who have never seen it and don't know what it is. So can you just tell them kind of what the device is and what went into developing it?
Sure. And for anybody who's interested in this, you can, if you have an iPhone, you can download the Apollo Neuro app right now and feel the therapeutic vibrations of Apollo along with us. But basically, Apollo is not just a wearable, it's a technology platform that we developed from studying the stress response in the Department of Psychiatry, originally at the University of Pittsburgh Medical Center, to try to come up with non-drug technology-based solutions to translate some of these great discoveries like Eric Kandel's work in neuroscience into practical tools that people can use that don't have side effects for children, adults, veterans of war scenarios, elderly folks with dementia, anybody who is struggling with stress and stress making symptoms worse. And we know that stress for pretty much any illness makes your symptoms worse, mental, physical, what have you. That's well known. So anybody who's struggling and not getting relief with medications or not a good candidate for medications, we needed another tool. And so I just had a theory that based on the way that music and sound waves calm us down, right? You've had the experience like probably every human has where you're having a crappy day and then you get in your car, you go into a room and all of a sudden one of your favorite songs is playing and you're like, wow, I feel so much better, right? Instantaneously, by the way. And hugs do the same thing if you like the person, right? Or holding a pet. And it's instantaneous. And yet we've never understood why that works. In neuroscience, up until the last 20 years, we never understood why you can have a terrible day, your worst day ever even, and then hearing your favorite song by chance or getting a hug from a loved one can just almost instantly correct the experience. And so I just noticed it in myself, noticed it from seeing other people have these experiences. Then I did a bunch of research looking at how this had been studied, which had been studied in a little bit, but not with a full explanation. I thought, well, if this is a relatively universal human experience, there has to be something in our nervous system that is changing to reflect what's happening in the body. And so as I started to explore that, what I found is that it's about vagus nerve activity. It's about the parasympathetic rest and recovery nervous system being activated by soothing sensations that remind us that we're safe. And part of that soothing sensation is familiarity. It's things that we know, right? So it's like the smell of your mom's chicken soup or the favorite food your mom makes, or seeing or interacting with someone or something, or hearing one of your favorite songs, something that you like, that you associate with comfort, even in a really stressful situation, reminds you that you're safe because it's familiar to you. And that was really interesting. And the outcome of that safety is vagus nerve tone goes up, which then you can measure as like lower heart rate, lower breath rate, higher heart rate variability. And so we started to do these studies on our own and found, in fact, this is true, replicating past work, that these kinds of soothing sensations do improve vagus nerve activity reliably, even in double-blind, randomized, placebo-controlled trial environments. And so then I thought, well, if this is known now that, and we revalidated it, that soothing things help calm the body, mind and body, and you can measure it, then is there a way to deliver that soothing sensation to the body without requiring your ears or your nose or any effort on your part? Can we just send the right signal to the body and the body will know how to interpret it and self-soothe? And so we started to look at vibration and touch, because touch is the oldest mammalian soothing sensation that we all experience. I don't know if you have kids, but as soon as, if you have kids yourself, or if anybody listening has kids, you've had this experience. And even if you haven't had kids, you've had this experience probably when you were first born. You might not remember it, which is that when the first thing that happens when any mammal gives birth to a child or an offspring is that they bond with that child or offspring through nursing and physical contact to soothe that offspring. And it's not that newborn. And it's completely nonverbal, instantaneous calm.
Yeah.
Right? And that it works because that touch is safe signaling to the brain. It tells the brain, hey, if you have time to pay attention to this nice feeling you're feeling right now, then you can't possibly be running from a lion in this moment. You have to be safe enough for us to allow you to be able to pay attention to this feeling, for the reptilian amygdala brain, the fear center, to allow itself to settle down. You have to feel safe. And so when we started to see those patterns, we thought, well, what if we could compose music for your touch receptor system, for your body instead of your ears, that was at the rhythm that the heart and lungs and the brain want to be functioning at when we're breathing properly, which we know I think I mentioned this earlier, if you breathe at 5 to 7 breaths per minute, you boost vagus nerve tone and you calm down within 90 to 180 seconds. And this has been known for thousands of years in ancient cultures, but it's been known since the 60s through the study of biofeedback in Western science. Is proven.
Right.
And so we thought, well, what if you just send the right rhythm to the body? Will the body know how to breathe properly and then calm the mind? And that was effectively what we discovered that became Apollo, which is that if you send a very gentle vibration, which is composed by sound waves, to the body at a rhythm that oscillates starting around 5 to 7 times per minute at that very specific rhythm, the body feels it, it recognizes it as familiar, and it says, oh, this is soothing. And then the heart and lungs start to sync with it. And then your brain starts to sync with it. And within 60 to 180 seconds, you settle down noticeably and your stress goes down because you're feeling more centered and present and in control of your body and how you feel. And that effectively was born in the lab from 2014 to 2018. And then it came out as the Apollo wearable in 2020 that you and I are both wearing.
Yeah, and what I respected so much when I first got into it and started looking, because I'm like, I like to research, I like to read about things. I wanted to read about the technology when it first came out. And one of the things I respected the most was just the quality of the trials. Like people don't understand. You're going to see people for products and they'll say, oh, it's been tested, or, oh, this has been researched. And really you have to look at the quality of the research and the testing behind things. And what I want everyone to know is that, Dr. Dave's already explained it, and I know I'm going to toot your horn for you, that I just respect that so much, because this is not a joke. Like, this is legitimate research that's hardcore, proven. I have felt it. I've seen others feel it. And I think too, Dr. Dave, you'll understand what I'm saying here. People can be stressed with trying to calm down their nervous system. So having a passive device that all they have to do is wear it, and you can program it to do certain things. And hey, if you get a crummy email and start to feel your nervous system flare up, you can click that calm button on your app, and I've done it. I just was like, oh gosh, you know what? I got out of a meeting, and you could just be like, whew, I just, take a deep breath with it. Are there places you recommend wearing it for benefits? Do you see any data or research around, like, obviously a lot of us put it on the wrist, and I know the theory is like put it near a bone, but are there different places that you see? I actually had some pretty good luck with clipping it on the top of a bra where it was touching my chest near my heart. So, cause I felt that was very soothing.
Yeah, that's a great question. The interesting thing about Apollo and why we built it the way we built it, you see me wearing it on my chest, it works anywhere on the body. And as you said, it works passively, meaning you don't have to pay attention to it for it to do its thing. And we did that because we were taught as doctors at that time and therapists to teach patients with PTSD how to meditate and how to breathe properly, which is really important, don't get me wrong. At the same time, many patients are not, or who are, especially people who are really sick, are not in a mind state where they're ready for that practice. Mm-hmm. And the reason why is because as soon as you start to quiet your mind, guess what floods in? Is all the negative intrusive thoughts. Yeah. And then if you don't know how to deal with those, you're going to feel pretty crappy every time you meditate for a really long time. And it sets folks up for failure because they're like, well, the doctor said I'm supposed to be doing this and said it's evidence-based, but it's not working for me. So then what's wrong with me that this doesn't work for me? And it recapitulates that cycle of what's wrong with me, which is the complete opposite of our goal of healing. And so we thought, well, we got to use science to make this easier. And we got to make it available to people anywhere on their bodies, wherever. Maybe you like to wear things on your wrist. I personally don't. Mm-hmm. I like to wear things on my chest or my ankle. So most people actually wear Apollo on their ankle. And then we have a clip that you can see. So this is the same device you're wearing, but you can just put a clip in, put it on your belt. You can put it in your pocket. You put it between your buttons. Many women wear it on their bra, like right in the center, or a bra strap. And it just, as long as you just barely feel the gentle like ocean wave-like vibration, it's enough for your body to sync with it. And the more that you do that, then the more that your body gets used to being and retrained or reminded to breathe and be at the right nervous system rhythm. Yeah. And with less fight or flight less fight or flight as much of the time, and more recovery, because guess what? most of us, thank goodness, are actually safe more of the time than we think.
Yeah.
Right. I think that the mind is very easily tricked by being overstimulated. And when we're overstimulated, we do something that is very important for people to understand, which is a psychology term, but we misappropriate threat. So what that means is we attribute threat or the idea of threat to things that are not actually threatening. Mm-hmm. And guess what that first thing is? It's anything new.
Yeah.
Because new potentially carries uncertainty with it. And so guess what's new? New healing techniques, right? Starting a new exercise routine, starting a new breathing routine, starting a new meditation, mindfulness routine, changing your diet. All that's new. So what's familiar, what feels safe to me is actually when I'm stressed out, sitting on the couch and binging on Netflix and eating a whole pint of Haagen-Dazs. But that is not helpful to me in the long term. And in the short term, it might make me feel better. In the long term, it makes me overweight and sugar addicted and, numbs my brain. And I'm still just as anxious the next day as I was when I started. So that understanding this idea of how we place the concept and perceived threat. And again, I hesitate to beat a dead horse, but this is the brilliance of Eric Kandel's Nobel Prize winning work in 2000, that he discovered that humans learn and remember around fear and safety the same way that 300 million year old sea snails learn and remember around fear and safety. And that is so important for us to know because it's not personal. Do you know what I mean?
Right,
It's learned behavior. You feel and act the way you do, just like us, because you learn to feel and act a certain way. It's not because there's anything wrong with you. And when you take that personal part out of it and just understand, hey, this is how the body works, right? This is how we learn. This is how we remember. This is what makes us feel good and safe. And this is what makes us feel afraid and threatened. And that impacts our behavior and the way we make decisions. All of a sudden, you can change yourself in an instant and the outcome of your life. But if you make it personal, all of a sudden, you can't see the forest through the trees because everything's clouded and hazy and foggy.
Yeah, I want to see I've been waiting to ask you this question for months and I'm wondering if it ties into what you said about how something new is a perceived threat, because this happened to myself, one of my coworkers at the clinic, and also I've seen it happen to a couple patients. So I put the Apollo Neuro on the first time and it agitated me the first time. Okay. It was agitating me. I had to turn down the vibration and I said, I wonder if that means I need it even more than I thought. And I can tell by the people that it's happened to, because I would have considered myself someone who for sure, and still, we all need to work on stress. It's an ongoing thing, but I've come a long way. This is someone who when I was a patient in functional medicine, had an HRV of 13 and now is in the 70s. So something's going right when that happens, right? So yeah. I just wondered if what I'm talking to you about, would it agitate someone possibly the first couple times they wore it until they did understand that this is safe? Is that what that reaction might have been?
Yes, I think that's a really great point, is that it's the newness of it is triggering that threat response because we're overstimulated. That our bodies are actually, it's the same with learning new things. Our bodies literally, this is why kids who are stressed out can't learn in school. And we confuse it for ADHD, right? Most kids don't have ADHD. Some do, but most are stressed or have had hardship in their lives that has not been dealt with properly. And so guess what? They're not going to be able to learn properly or focus properly because our brains shut down learning new things and building new habits when we're stressed out. We don't want to prioritize learning new things when we're running from a bear in the jungle, right? Mm-hmm. Or a lion, bear in the forest, lion in the jungle, right? That's just not how we survive. That's not that's a hardwired system. So you can apply that same understanding to anything new.
Yep.
And especially people who have high anxiety, where everything is about controlling, a sense of control and certainty preservation, those folks have an especially hard time with adopting new techniques that help to them to recover. And so that's actually why with everybody, not just folks who have chronic anxiety disorders, but with everyone who tries Apollo to start, we always recommend start with the intensity of the vibration. so low that you can just barely feel it.
Yeah, I did that wrong.
Many people do, because they're like, oh, more calm is more, but it's actually not more. The reason why there's an intensity slider or a volume bar is so that you can, if you're on a plane or you're in a very loud, noisy environment like a New York City street, you need to turn it up more just to feel it. But when you're at home in your bed or you're in a quiet environment, you want that vibration level to be very, very low, because if it's distracting to you and it's new at the same time, you're just setting yourself up to not have a successful experience. It's just like listening to music too loud, right? You can listen to your favorite song at the right volume and it sounds amazing. And then you listen to your favorite song like several decibels higher and you're like, oh my God, this is so jarring. I can't even deal with this right now. I can't focus. I can't think, right? And so it's the same core concept. So I think in general for people, more is not more, less is more. That saying exists for a reason. And we should all keep that in mind, because it goes across the board for everything. Like, don't overeat, don't overstimulate yourself, don't play your music too loud. Like occasionally, but in general across the board, having more delicate, gentle, soothing experiences, including with Apollo, where you start it where you just barely notice it and then gradually turn it up as you get used to it, is going to give you the best experience across the board. And that's how we see people, really have these incredibly, life-changing experiences like we've had with the product.
Yeah, and I know I could ask you about 10 more questions, but I want to be respectful of your time today, because you've lended your time to us so generously. A couple quick questions to close here. I want to talk about what's next, what's coming down the pike, and we talked about sessions coming out right now for Apollo users. We get a preview of it, but to talk about some of the technology coming down the pike here with this device to come.
So I think everybody who has experienced Apollo before knows about the wearable, and wearables are exciting because it's Apollo is really what we call and what others in the wearable space have called the third generation of wearable technology, which is wearable technology that actually changes how our bodies function and how we feel, right? Everything Gen 2 wearable and below just tracks our data. Tracking your data means you have to change stuff on your own about how you feel and how your body functions based on the data, which requires effort. Apollo is of the third generation and it's one of, if not the first of the third generation of wearables that uses science to change how you feel and how your body functions for you, because science can do that. So why shouldn't we have that ability for all of us, right? That being said, these kinds of technologies are expensive and not everybody can afford them. And we understand that. And, as much as we try to make it affordable for everyone, we have to, we have our costs it's very expensive to make, et cetera, et cetera. And so we really have been working hard over the last several years especially over the last 2 years, to make Apollo cheaper and more accessible to everyone, and ideally free. And so what's coming that I am so excited about, and it's coming first on iPhone, and you can experience a demo of this. Again, if you go to the App Store on Apple and download or an iPhone near you, download the Apollo Neuro app. It's 2 words, and just open the app, don't click anything, and just let the app walk you through the experience for 60 seconds, and you'll feel what I'm talking about. And this is what's coming, called Apollo Sessions, that allows you to feel Apollo vibe, these scientifically backed Apollo vibes and vibration patterns through your phone, through a device you already have in your back pocket. You can now deliver science-backed sound waves that are proven to calm your body, decrease your heart rate, increase access to meditative states, improve focus, help you with public speaking or date night anxiety. All of these things that are real life things where normally you might have a drink or take a drug or do something maybe potentially self-destructive long-term, Netflix and Haagen-Dazs binging, whatever it is, right? But the point is, we have these other habits that we've developed to deal with discomfort. And now we're releasing Apollo to the phone that allows you to, for free, manage discomfort and challenge on your own in the moment, when most of us, in a world where most of us have never learned how to do it. And you can share it with your friends and experience that with your friends. So that is coming in February of 2025. We could not be more excited to offer that to the world. And of course, you can subscribe to Apollo sessions in February, and you'll start to get access to more vibes and group experiences and things like that. But the best part about it is that it's free for anyone who has an iPhone, and we couldn't be more proud to be able to make this technology accessible to everyone who could benefit from it.
I love that. And I also love it because when I leave my Apollo at home accidentally on the charger, I can go to my phone and use it in a pinch, because that happens sometimes.
That's when I use it the most too.
Yeah, that I could see that being a benefit for me. So last thing to close is just how can people kind of connect with you, and also where's the best place for them to go to learn more about Apollo Neuro and start exploring this for themselves?
Yeah, so I'd love to hear from everybody. If you want to connect with me, best place is probably on social media, like Dr. David Rabin on Instagram and Twitter. And then if you're interested in my clinical practice, or I still see patients, I'm one of the few psychiatrists in the world who's trained in both ketamine and MDMA-assisted therapy, and I run a holistic psychiatry practice. And if you're ever interested in that kind of thing, you could check out my website at apollo.clinic. And if you want to find Apollo Neuro, you can go to apolloneuro.com or wearablehugs.com, which is what the kids call it. And then I also, for anybody who's interested in more of my work in technology, innovation, psychedelics, and kind of like how the brain works and where mental health is going and evolving into the 21st century. I have 2 shows that are on Spotify and iTunes or Apple Music. One of them that's generally about consciousness in the brain is called Your Brain Explained. And the other one is mostly about psychedelic medicine and experiences, which is called The Psychedelic Report, which is the psychedelic news every couple weeks that comes out.
Great. Awesome. I cannot thank you enough for joining us. And I could have kept you for 2 hours, but I really appreciate all your time. It's fascinating, and I love listening to you. So thank you for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me. This was really fun.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Ripple Effect Connection. Stress is something we all face, but as Dr. Dave reminded us today, we don't have to let it control our lives. With tools like Apollo Neuro and a better understanding of how our bodies and minds respond to stress, we can find balance, build resilience, and create the safety we need to thrive. If this conversation resonated with you, take a moment to reflect. How are you currently managing stress? What small steps could you take to support your nervous system today? And don't forget, Dr. Dave gave us an exciting sneak peek into what's next for Apollo Neuro, showing that innovation in this space is only just beginning. If you're interested in learning more or trying Apollo Neuro for yourself, check out the show notes for links and resources. And if this episode inspired you, please share it with someone in your life who could use a little extra support managing stress. As always, I thank you for being part of this episode of Ripple Effect Connection. We'll see you next time. Let's create waves of change together.